Hey there, VC. My name is Ross, and welcome to my channel. I first wanted to give a shout out to a new channel called Collecting Elton John, and I thought I would go ahead and do my own video and share some of my Elton John collectibles. Elton John was born Reginald Dwight in Middlesex, England in 1947, and was a young child prodigy, learning the piano at a very young age. And by his teens, Elton was playing out in clubs and pubs and backing other artists. One of those artists was Long John Baldry, who was a popular British blues singer in the London clubs at the time. And Elton later would support him by appearing on a couple of his records back early 70s on the Warner Brothers label. And these are really great records, and I highly recommend them. Rod Stewart is on this one, and Elton appears on this one as well as members of Elton's band at that time, which was Hookfoot. Now, they were a British blues band, and several members worked with Elton, and they became his touring band, featuring Caleb Quaye, Dave Glover, Ian Duck, and Roger Pope, who supported Elton for a few years and were on Elton's early recordings and albums. Now I'm going to show this album that came out a few years ago called Reginald Sergeant Zippo, and this consists of early tracks that Elton and Bernie had wrote in kind of a psychedelic vein. However, they never got released at the time. I think they realized that psych was on the way out, and Bernie and Elton decided to focus their creativity on other types of songs. Elton's early singles appeared on the Philips label in England, and he had a couple singles, Rock and Roll Madonna, Lady Samantha, early recording of Grey Seal, and Bad Side of the Moon, etc. But these appeared in the 70s on a rare 8-track, which is the only compilation of these tracks that existed for a long, long time. And this was an import from the UK. Those early tracks eventually showed up on this CD set, and I highly recommend this. This also included tracks from the soundtrack Friends that Elton worked on in 1970. Elton's first actual solo album was Empty Sky, and this was released in 1969 in the UK, and Elton had joined with the DJM label, which was Dick James Music. This is an early copy. This has a mono cover, however the record is stereo. And that's the DJM label there. If you hold this up to a light, it has a slight translucent red color, and that's how you know you have a early pressing of that. This is a really good album. It's definitely a sophomoric album, but it has some really fine songs. The title song, Valhalla, Western Ford Gateway, Skyline Pigeon, and Elton and Bernie were really fine-tuning their craft when they started recording for DJM. And the first big successful album was this Elton John self-titled album that came out in 1970. And this had members of Hookfoot on it, Caleb Quaye and Steve Brown, and some other folks, Paul Buckmaster, Diana Lewis, Gus Dudgeon, and of course Bernie. And this was his breakthrough album with his breakthrough single, Your Song. Elton's follow-up to that was Tumbleweed Connection, and Bernie and Elton apparently were very fond of Americana and Western styles. And that's what this album is thematically about. It has some great songs, including Love Song, which featured Leslie Duncan, guest appearance vocal. And this was the first album, I believe, with Dee Murray. Nigel had been on the first record, and members of Hookfoot are also on this as well. But this is one of my favorite albums and one of his strongest efforts. And Elton and Bernie had also worked on a soundtrack for a film called Friends. It came out in 1970. And the soundtrack album was a staple of the cutout bins for years. If you ever went to the mall stores, this was definitely going to be in the bins. But it has some great music on it, and some really good Elton John vocals and instrumental pieces. The follow-up album to that was Madman Across the Water. And this had Levon, and that was a major hit. And the title track, of course, Indian Sunset. Tiny Dancer probably is the best well-known song off of it now. It's eclipsed Levon a little bit. This also came in a really nice package with an inner booklet, illustrations, and lyrics. So TJM was definitely investing in Elton John and his career very well. When Elton first came to America, towards the end of 1970, he did a radio broadcast, and those tunes ended up on this album, 171170 or 1770 as it was known in the States. This particular reissue of it has all the tracks on it. It's a double album set. Originally the British album and the American album featured different set of songs, so you had to buy both, but it's nice to have it all in one package, and this reissue sounds really great, and the performances are top-notch, featuring Dee Murray and Nigel Olsson, who traveled to America with Elton, and they played at the clubs like Troubadour in LA. Elton's next album was Honky Chateau, and this had Rocket Man and Honky Cat, which were the big singles off of it. And this was the first album to feature Davy Johnstone. So it had the original band intact, Nigel Olsson, Dee Murray, Davy Johnston, and Jean-Luc Ponty appears on this as well. This album came in a nice wallet-style sleeve with this little flap on it that kind of locks into place on the back, which actually makes it a pain in the butt to undo every time you play it, but nice package nonetheless. The next record was Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player, and this had Daniel on it and Crocodile Rock, which were huge AM hits at the time. And all my early albums are original DJM UK pressings, and the UK cover came in a really nice laminated sleeve. And this next album was Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, which was probably Elton's blockbuster album, and it's just fantastic from beginning to end. Just wonderful songwritings, and Elton and Bernie were on top of their game with this album. I believe a lot of it was recorded in France, and this is a late 70s pressing from England on yellow vinyl, and my original copy I bought from Record Theater in Rochester as a kid, and was just so thrilled to have colored vinyl. There was a very brief thing about colored vinyl in the late 70s, and it had a very short lifespan, but that was the first major surge of colored vinyl. Next album was recorded in America at the Caribou Ranch. Thus, the album was named Caribou. And this had The Bitch Is Back and Don't Let the Sun Fall Down on Me, two major songs. And Elton was just a major, major star at this point. Very much at the top of his game. And this version of the band featured Ray Cooper on drums and percussion. And this lineup here is what's considered the classic Elton John band. And they toured as the Elton John band thereafter. So after Caribou, Elton John finally put out a greatest hits collection. And this was a major, major seller. And Elton followed up that album with a thematic album, which he and Bernie wrote about Elton's early days in the music business and establishing their career and getting signed. And it's a really nice package. It's got two booklets, which have lyrics and a scrapbook of Bernie and Elton's early days. And this was the last album to feature the full Elton John band as they were known by this time. And a lot of fans were very disappointed that Elton chose to change his lineup after that. But Elton apparently wanted to pursue a different sound and another direction. And he did that when he put out, what is that? Rock of the Westies, sorry. It's not my favorite Elton John album, but I need to get a vinyl copy of this. I have that hole in my collection. But this had some big hits on it. I think Island Girl was on this. And just kind of a more rockier sound. And the next year, I think 1976, Elton again experimented with the sound and put out this very mellow, ballad-laden album called Blue Moves. It was a double record set. And members of Hookfoot actually returned on this album. Elton had kept Davy Johnstone and Ray Cooper in the band, but the Hookfoot members returned. And this album had mixed reviews at the time, I remember, but it had a big song on it. Sorry seems to be the hardest word. And I think it's aged well. It's actually a really good album with really good songs on it. And the next album in 78 was A Single Man. And this was somewhat of a different record for Elton. It wasn't as much of a rock album. It was more him as a singer-songwriter. And I don't remember how this was received at the time, but it's a good album. It's an enjoyable listen. By the 80s, Elton had left DJM and MCA Records in the States and joined the David Geffen record company, which had started up around 1980 and had signed John Lennon and Yoko Ono, putting out the Double Fantasy album. And this album came out a year or two later. This is The Fox. And this has some really great songs on it. A lot of people disparage Elton's 80s output, but this is a really strong record. So after that, Elton continued to put out a number of albums on Geffen. Then he returned to MCA. And when CD came out, this is one of Elton's later albums. And early CDs were all printed in West Germany for Europe, and some made it to the American market before CDs started being pressed here. But these have great CD labels on them, and that's why I collect those. And they also really sound great too. This is Elton's Too Low for Zero album. Of course, I need to get these on vinyl, but I just haven't gotten around to that yet. This is such a great CD label. Just love these early CDs, and I collect early CDs partially for that reason, and also because they tend to sound really good. This is a DJM CD label, 80s compilation of classic tracks. Now, if you're collecting a digital CD collection, my recommendations is to try and find these early DJM West Germany CDs, as they sound phenomenal. They have a very natural, unfussed with sound. They didn't tweak the EQ or apply heavy noise reduction. And these are the West German pressings. They have these white spines with the red tags on the top, say stereo. This is a cool one too. This was a compilation of love songs. And this has a Rocket Records company label on it. But if you can't find those, you can do just as well. First, by skipping these 1995 Elton John Classic Year CDs, as they were EQ'd to death and had lots of noise reduction applied to them. So I would void this series like the plague. The only caveat is these have great bonus tracks and have all the singles that and B-sides that didn't make the album. So you kind of have to buy them for that. But an alternative to the West German early CDs is buying the MCA CDs, which were first pressed in Japan and then eventually in the USA. And those same masterings were also on the later Polydor CDs in America, which were pressed by PDO. And those sound just as good as the German DJMs. One of my favorite later Elton John albums is this Made in England. And this was actually pressed by Classic Records in, I think, 1993, and which was an audiophile record label at the time. And this was sort of a comeback album. It had great songs on it, great production. Oh, and I skipped over Jump Up. And this is a British gatefold. The American album was a single cover. And let's see. Yeah, that's on the Rocket Record Company as well. And of course, this had his song for John Lennon, Empty Garden, Hey Hey Johnny, which was a huge hit. And this came out on Geffen in America and Elton's own label, Rocket Record Company, in the UK. I don't have a lot of 45s, but this is one of my favorites. This was a single Elton did around Christmas 75, I believe. I had it as a kid, and this is a newer pressing that I picked up. But this is Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, backed with One Day at a Time. Had the classic band on it, and features Dr. Winston O'Boogie on guitars, which is actually John Lennon. But I loved this record as a kid, and very happy to have the picture sleeve. Elton, towards the end of the 90s, did this great duets album, and this featured duets with Leonard Cohen and George Michael, Kiki D, which was sort of a revisit. They had a big hit single in the 70s together. Paul Young, Bonnie Raitt, Gladys Knight, RuPaul, and all the big name artists you could possibly get at the time. But a really nice record to have, and it's nice to have Leonard Cohen on a comp like that. Huge Leonard Cohen fan. This is one of Elton's more recent albums, The Diving Board. It's a 2-record set, and a phenomenal record. Great production, great song quality and recording, and I highly recommend that. So I think that wraps it up for the best of my Elton John collection, and I hope you enjoyed seeing some of that. And definitely give a look at the channel Collecting Elton John if you get a chance. Highly recommended. And hope everyone's doing okay, and take care, guys. We'll see you around.